All right. Welcome to the Rise Up podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Mitchell. And on this show, I want to do my best to help simplify everything that goes in the weight loss process, help you get out of your own way so you can ultimately create results that last without the constant roller coaster that the fitness and the nutrition space constantly perpetuates on us. And yeah, I learned a lot. And I want to help you not take as nearly as long as it took me to learn, and hopefully save you some mistakes or mishaps, or help you at least learn from them quicker. And that's why today's episode is going over some important um under misunderstandings. Yeah, some misunderstandings that I really want to give you the perspective on to help you look at what you're doing and say, am I checking off these boxes? Is this really, am I doing something that's actually sustainable for me, or am I continuing to fall back into old patterns, old beliefs that make me feel miserable, and make this a lot harder than it needs to be. So I hope it helps. I hope it helps make some connections. And if you learn something, I want to remind people, leave a review for me down below, or a rating. It helps the show, or at least share this with one person, because it helps me out a lot. And I'm so grateful for all the growth that has happened in this year. So thank you for all of you who continue to share the show. I really, really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. The four things that you really need to understand when it comes to weight loss, to make it easier, right? If we can make this process easier, if we make this process easier, it's going to be easier for us to show up. And I don't mean like, well, it's just going to be all sunshine and rainbows. When we're trying to get to our weight loss goals, there's still going to be challenges that pop up. But if we can make it easier to understand, easier to show up, then we're going to make so many more strides in the right direction. And that's what's going to be the game changer. Is so many people get so discouraged that they stop moving in the right direction altogether, right? And when we're doing this to really solidify and sustain results, we need to be directionally right more than pinpoint accurate. Directional progress is the foundation that we need, and a lot of that is going to come through understanding. So these things to accept, or these hard truths, whatever you want to call them, these are what I'm constantly helping my clients understand and get comfortable with, so that as the life throws these curveballs at them, they know, okay, this is a situation that I can or can't control, or whatever it is, but it doesn't discourage them like it did in the past. So let's start with number one, right? The first thing that you really need to understand, and a lot of people have this misconception that we directly have a big impact, big control over our weight. But really, the truth is you can't control everything. And that sounds like, duh, Jonah, I know that. But there's a lot of us out there who we have a hard time accepting and understanding that. We think having as much control is going to make us feel better, but we are the type of person that, when one thing doesn't go our way, we get really, really down on ourselves, and we get very, very discouraged. And our body weight is a part of that. When we have a lot of chaos around, and there's a lot of disorganization in our life, with family, with work, and there's just so much stress, and we're constantly like stressed about all those things. We then we we're so focused on everything that we lack, or lack of control in our life, but we're still trying to hold on to everything as possible, as close as possible. Then we start to attach our body into those things of like, okay, I may not be able to control everything in my life. It's super crazy, super busy, but you know what? I feel uncomfortable with my weight, and I want to do something about it, and add that to the list of things I have to do. And I'm going to just focus. And if I get in better shape and control that, I will feel better about everything that I can't control outside of my life. And then we are, I say we because I am someone who had that mentality for a long period of time. I feel like I've had every mentality that people struggle with. Probably why I do so much work with psychology. But anyway, we get in that headspace of like, okay, if I can't control as much in my life as I like, I can control my body weight. And then when it doesn't go the way that we think, it's another defeat. It's another admittance of something that we don't have as much control as we thought over, and that sucks. And that sends us in the pattern of feeling miserable, spiraling, and stop going in the right direction. So I want to bring this up, and I want to remind people, because I say this a lot. We need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And life does a really good job at reminding us how much we can't control or how shitty of a situation that we're in, and it sucks having that reminder on a regular basis, right? If work is always taking your time and energy, if life events, struggles that you're going through that are constantly taking your time and energy away from how you want to feel, it's reminding you over and over and over that you should feel how the situations impact you more than the way that you actually want to feel. And in this situation, like when we I have a client who's going through a lot of personal stuff, a lot of financial stuff, and her life in her life, she's the one who does. She moves everything in the right direction always. If there's a problem, she's gonna fix it. And this situations that she's in right now, it's forced her to feel like she's so trapped and she can't control anything, and it's constantly reminding her how she feels like a loser, and then it's easy for her to believe that because of every reminder that she has in her life. It just constantly hits her over the head over and over and over of how much she can't get out of this situation, and it sucks. So then because we think it, we take it personally, and then it convinces us that the small stuff that we could control in these situations where there's a lot of stuff out of our control doesn't matter, doesn't have as much of an impact, and just further amplifies how much of a loser we are, because we should be able to still prioritize ourselves and all this stuff. We should be able to control our emotions and our reactions, but we're human. We are human beings, and we are not perfect. Like, this is something that we need to really, really accept, that there's just certain things in our lives that we will not be able to impact. And when it's reminding us how shitty we should feel about that, well, then we have to find reasons to counteract that. We have to find reasons to remind ourselves that, hey, I can still do something. And as long as we remind ourselves that something is always better than nothing, even though it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like you're getting that much of a workout by doing 10 minutes instead of an hour. It doesn't feel like going for a walk is as impactful as a CrossFit workout. It doesn't feel like just prioritizing protein and color is going to do enough for your food when you're used to doing everything all at once. But if we don't do anything, we're just letting the life reminders of how shitty or annoyed or like a loser or how incapable we are. We're letting those play on repeat over and over and over again. So what we want to, what really, you can't control everything. When we understand we can't control everything and we can focus on what we can control, this gives us a different an ability to combat the perspective that life is trying to throw at us for whatever situation that we're in. And when we do that, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be pretty. We just need to lessen the blow that life keeps throwing at us day in and day out when we find ourselves in challenging places. Because eventually, as we show up consistently, like this is another client of mine that started with me back in January, February. She was in a very similar boat. Her life was very crazy, going in and out of work, doing a side hustle, being a mom. And she was the all or nothing person. And it took me a long time to convince her that just doing something was better than nothing. And then the way that she was thinking, the immediacy of her getting down on herself because she couldn't control everything, but she kept focusing on just trying to control her weight. And when we took the focus away from the weight and just the things that the small things that she can control daily, well, 4, 5, 6 months in, she stopped having as many negative thoughts about herself. And she stopped beating herself up for the things that she couldn't control. She started celebrating the things that she did. When she was out of control in an environment where she couldn't make the food or there was alcohol involved, she made the best choice she could, and she felt good about that. She started questioning when and where she wanted alcohol because she started noticing that she only wanted to drink because she felt obligated to. So she felt empowered and in control and felt good that she could make a decision that's, one, going to align with her health goals, and two, make sure that she or give her a reminder that she's in control in these environments. So one more little visual before I move on from this one, because this is a very important thing. There's three, we have a circle of influence, and there's 3 layers to the circle. And there's if you're watching on YouTube, I have a little sticky note. It's not very pretty, but the innermost layer is the smallest layer, and that's the area of stuff that we can control, right? That's the stuff that we need to identify. What are the things in this little this little circle that I can control. I can control my effort. I can control my focus. I can control showing up at least in some small way every single day, right? And once we get abundantly clear on those things first, then we have more ammo to combat that negative side in our head, right? Then the second layer is called the things that we influence, right? We don't necessarily have control over them, but we have a direct influence over them, right? So this may be if you have kids, your kids. You don't always have direct control, but you have influence over them. Another thing that many people don't like to understand or don't realize, but once they do understand, is your body weight is in the second layer of influence, right? It's not in the area that you can control. You could only influence your body weight with the movement, with the food quality that you choose, right? It's not something that we directly control all the time, which is why when we get in our heads of all the things that we feel bad about or we think we have control over, when our body weight doesn't go the way that we want it to, then it gets very frustrating, right? But when we understand something that we influence, then when we look at the things that we can control, well, then as long as we're influencing our body weight in the right direction, even in some small way, this is what's going to help convince our brain over time that we can move the needle. We can get out of the situation. We can regain control of things that made us feel like we were completely out of control, right? And then the outer layer is the things that are completely out of our control, right? And once we understand, oh, I didn't ask for the stress of my job. I didn't ask for this crazy life event. I didn't ask for this family loss. When you didn't ask for those things, you couldn't control them. You put them in the category of, okay, I didn't ask for this. I'm not a piece of shit for bringing that into my life, because it was something that I just have to deal with. And then we work back through the layers of what we can control. And that's what gives us the ability to work through and understand what we can and can't control. Understand that focusing on the things that we can control will give us bigger influence. And when we have bigger influence, we will have much more sustainability in the long run, because nothing life throws at us with the things that we can't control will knock us off the path or knock us off the direction. All right. So I beat this one like a dead horse because this one's a very important one, but let's move on because I got 3 more to go over. This one, I really want people to understand. So number two, this one is a very big misconception. We all hear losing half a pound to a pound, or if you're on MyFitnessPal or whatever tracking app, and it says, eat this much to lose 2 pounds a week, right? We hear half a pound to a pound to even up to 2 pounds a week is healthy, sustainable weight loss. So when we hear that over and over and over again, and we're not constantly seeing a half a pound, 2 pounds lost every single week, well, we get very, very discouraged. So the truth here that you really need to accept is that weight loss is not always linear. And this goes back to the things that we control and we influence, right? You can do everything perfectly and the scale still could not go down in the direction that you want it to. That's just how it works. Again, it's not something that we have a direct control over, even if, and this is not to say that you can't do it, but it's just, if it's not happening the way that you think it's supposed to, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong, right? When it comes to changing our body, there's a lot of things that are playing a factor. We need to understand how long it took for us to gain weight over time. Has it been a lifelong thing? Has it been over a few years? Has it been over a few decades? Right? Just because you're getting really motivated for a couple months or a few weeks, that you're not going to undo every single thing you did over the years. Again, not to say that you can't have a crazy amount of change in a short amount of time, like 6 to 12 months, right? But you need to understand that the biggest thing here, the biggest thing that's going to stop you is if you just give up. If it doesn't go the way that you think, and you just let yourself fall off the path, you're going to single-handedly guarantee that you will not see the results. But if you learn to accept that, okay, just because it isn't linear doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong, then you will find more reasons to keep showing up. This is the kind of the theme of today. Showing up is the most important thing you can do. And we get in our own way when it comes to those things because we feel like we're doing something wrong if it doesn't work the way that we think it's supposed to. It's supposed to. A lot of us don't actually know because a lot of us aren't actually successful. We assume based off of people around us, based off of the stuff we read on the internet, but we don't have the actual personal experience or success yet. And again, as someone who has worked through all this, who's maintained his level of in shapeness for as long as I have, the feelings of not wanting to show up, the feelings of overwhelm, the lack of progress, or the insecurities, they don't go away. The only thing that will help with those things and make them less impactful is continuing to prove those things wrong, continuing to show up regardless, right? So when it's not working, quote unquote, not working the way that you think, you need to understand, okay, it's not linear. Because when we're looking at trends for our body weight, we actually see the half a pound, the quarter pound, half a pound, or a whole pound of weight loss per week over a expanded period of time. So a lot of times you don't see that weight loss, that sustained, or that half a pound to a pound week in after week out. But like another client of mine who's been with me for 8 months now, she's 25 about 25 pounds down, probably a little bit more. And in the beginning we were seeing some slow progress in the right direction, but it was never like this, okay, it's every pound a week, a pound a week, a pound a week. There was, I guess there was after we had established a good routine for her to show up regardless, then we started to see, okay, the consistency trend, but week in and week out she didn't notice the half a pound or a pound down, right? She was weighing in almost pretty much daily, and to her there was not much significant change. But after 8 months, and since she was seeing it every single day, she didn't even realize, oh, she's down 25 pounds. And then when we divided up the time but by the weeks and how much weight she's lost, well, it's been 0.65 pounds a week, but it wasn't always 0.65 pounds down every single week. It was just compounded and then averaged over that time period. That's where the half a pound to a pound like statement comes from. It's the time you've done, the time it's taken you, divided by the amount of weeks, right? And it's not always linear. That's why it gets very misleading. So when you're paying attention, this is why multiple weigh-ins a week is really, really beneficial, because even though there's a lot of people who are nervous about the scale, but like once I help people kind of work through that, then I explain to them why we want to weigh in multiple times a week instead of just once, because we take the average of the week instead of the one-time weigh-in, because there's so many things that affect the scale that could negatively impact that ratio or that relationship with yourself, that ratio of maintenance, because there's always our body weight's always going to fluctuate regardless of what we're doing. And if 1 week it's up, it's 1 week it's down, and we only weighing in once a week, well, we don't know why or how or when that will happen, right? And when we have multiple weigh-ins and we take an average, we can see trends of the progress over time. So that if you don't notice the daily weigh-in and you're the change in the daily weigh-in, and you're like getting really discouraged, but if you have like 3 to 7 weigh-ins, and you take the average at the end of the week and you compare that average from your average the prior week, well, then you start to see quarter pound down, half a pound down, because that's what we want. We want to see the trend go in the right direction. We don't want it. It's not just a half a pound every single Monday. It's going to be down. Oh, you're making progress. Some Mondays you'll be heavier than the last Monday. So that's why we want multiple data points to understand, oh, yesterday, family outing, had some alcohol, had some higher carb foods. Okay, scale's going to be up, got to go back to normal. And then as you go throughout the week, you see as that water weight that you had added comes down, and then you take the average, and that's where you get more accurate. So this is where you can make it linear by understanding, okay, it's not linear because it's not going down half a pound to a pound every week. It's like you will not notice that all the time. And that's okay. Sometimes it will stall. Sometimes it will plateau, right? That doesn't mean you do anything wrong. You just need to keep going in the right direction and take when you start taking the average. And again, this takes time, but I want you to understand that when you get to half a pound to a pound, it's average over time instead of just a week by week basis. And if it's not working the way that you think, again, you're not doing anything wrong. I want to give you the ability to see these things and look at what you're doing and be like, okay, I'm being too hard on myself. I don't have enough information. Again, that's hard for people who have a rough relationship with the scale, but if you only have a once a week weigh-in, you don't have enough information to truly judge if what you're doing is working, right? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you'll just see like once a week weigh-in and you will continue to see progress. That's great. But if it's not happening, this is the thing. If it's not happening, that's not a bad thing. All right. And now you have more ammo to convince your brain that it doesn't have to respond or react like the way it used to. That's the difference. And remember, if you're new to the podcast or if you're a longtime listener, these thoughts don't go away when we get to our goals. We just get better at understanding them and putting them back in their place and not believing them and letting them discourage us the way that they used to. All right. So I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And yeah, let's move on to three. So this one is, I think everyone's heard it. I know I'm 99% everyone has heard it in some way. But the whole eat less, move more thing, right? That's the oversimplification of getting into a calorie deficit. And the truth here is that there's only one way to lose weight, to lose body fat, and that's to be in a calorie deficit. If it's not happening, it's not always the fact that there's something wrong with you. A lot of times, and most of the time, mind you, I say most of the time, not all the time. If you're doing everything quote unquote right and you're not seeing the results that you think you should, you are not doing everything right. You are not in a deficit. And that's not to say that you are intentionally trying to sabotage your results. This is me helping you understand that there may be a piece of information, there may be a lack of awareness that you haven't been able to pinpoint just yet that is holding your body back from sustaining that deficit that you're looking for, that's going to lead to the fat loss, the weight loss, right? Because if we do not elicit a calorie deficit, our body doesn't hear the signal that it needs to burn through the energy that's stored on our body. That's what body fat is. It's energy. And if we're always consuming in a maintenance calories, that's what happens when our body doesn't gain or lose any weight. Then our body never feels the need to burn through the energy that is stored elsewhere, right? So if we get it used to sending that signal like, hey, we need to burn this off, we need to burn other energy, that's where our body will tap into the fat cells and use those for energy, right? It's not comfortable. Our body doesn't like doing that, right? But if we don't get into a deficit consistently, it's not going to see the progress that we want. And there's many reasons why that we may not be in a deficit. And this is something that I always want my people to understand. If we don't pay attention to these things first in the very beginning, the discrepancies that may be adding extra calories that we weren't aware of first, if we don't identify those, then no matter what macro prescription I give you, it may not work. And that's very infuriating when we're trying to expect weight loss after we've identified, or when we're trying to expect weight loss and we have a bunch of patterns that we weren't aware of that are adding calories that are keeping us more in a maintenance. And then again, very frustrating conversation. So when you understand, okay, there's only one way to lose weight, and if I'm not losing weight, I'm not in a deficit, we start looking at our day-to-day. And it's very easy to get like, for our day-to-day to get very monotonous, and we don't think about it. So we're not as inquisitive as we should be. We don't question ourselves as much as we should, because we're doing everything right. We've been doing the same thing over and over again, and we should be seeing the result, but we're not. Well, that's the problem. Once we get used to something and used to a certain pattern, we stop looking at it like I said, inquisitively. We stop looking at it and say, is there possible discrepancy? Is there a gap here that I may be missing? And it's not to say that you are a piece of shit for doing this. It is to say, okay, I just need to be aware. If I can be a little bit more aware, I can probably save myself some time and find out the real reason why I'm not seeing my progress. And once we have that, right, once we gain control of understanding, oh, this is why I wasn't seeing the results. It's not because you're intentionally trying to do it. We just weren't aware of it. But once we become aware of it, then it's much easier to fix it, right? So once we understand there's only one way to lose weight, and that's being in a calorie deficit. If we're not seeing that weight loss, we're not in a calorie deficit. Again, most of the time, there are certain diseases out there or metabolic adaptations that can make that process much more difficult, which adding in fuel is necessary, not always. Once we understand that, then we get to look and see, okay, am I paying attention on my liquid calories? Am I weighing everything in grams? Am I snacking from my kid's plate? Am I stress eating? Am I obligated drinking? Right? Or anything of the like are there things that are sneaking in, creeping in, that you haven't been paying attention to? And once you identify that, once you pay attention to those things, then we get to say, oh, catch that pattern, right? Catch it. So do you always want to respond that way? Do you always want to let those things creep into your diet? Yes or no? Why or why not? Oh, another thing, are you eating out with your meals a lot of the time? Because you can be tracking and weighing those meals and still be off, because no one in the back of the restaurant is weighing and measuring everything they put in the meals. Even if the calories are on the menu, right? They're not weighing it out perfectly, right? They just throw it on there as that's good enough, right? So are those meals that you're eating, are they eating out? So are we possibly letting in extra calories that we are not able to account for because, well, we're not cooking these meals, right? Again, just common areas that could make it harder for our body to get into that deficit, to be more in a maintenance, right? But once we identify these things, this is the game changer. It's like, okay, cool. How do we adjust? How do we adjust to make sure that we either limit the amount of discrepancies, or at least close or shorten the window, right? If you can't always not eat out, can you always get the small meal instead of the medium or the large that you're used to? That makes a difference. That is a huge difference. If you do that consistently, you compound it over time, because then your calories are going to end up being less somewhere. Yeah, you're going to feel hungry because the process of telling your body that it needs to burn through its energy stores that are essential for survival, right? And then one more little rabbit hole. This is why we store body fat to begin with. And this is why super incredibly low calorie diets suck for many people who are overweight, obese. They're so used to feeling satisfied or full that when we tell it the opposite, that we want to that food is not as abundant, it's not used to that. It's used to storing body fat for survival, right? So like we do not need muscle to survive. We need body fat because there was a time where food was not abundant, right? So we survived off of our body fat. Now food is very abundant. And because of that, our biology, when we go into extreme deficits, hunger spikes, focus and energy dips, because our body isn't used to it just yet. It's not used to feeling hungry. And slight hunger is normal. Hunger is normal when you're trying to lose weight. I don't want you starving and ravenous at the end of the day, but I want you slightly hungry. That's why we focus on protein and fibrous food, so you feel more satisfied, but calorically you're consuming less. And when we're doing this, right, we want to lessen that stress of hunger and depletion of energy, so that the deficit is much more sustainable. And then your body starts to eventually get used to that, and then it uses its own energy stores for your energy, for your focus. So the initial change is tough, but after your body gets used to it, it's using its own energy, then the focus, the clarity, the satiation, the hunger, they get more manageable, and because it gets used to it, right? So that's really where we want to focus on establishing the process of establishing the only way to lose weight in a way that makes us feel better, not miserable. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to eat 1,200 calories. Everyone's deficit number is a little bit different based off of life, based off of body size, based off of current activity. There's so many things that dictate where your actual deficit number is, but there's only one way to lose weight. It's not one way to get there. There's multiple ways to get there, right? And when we start to pay attention, and we pay attention to what may be holding us back and identify those, this is what gives us the ability to make the adjustments, the targets that will help us elicit a deficit more often, which leads me to the last one, number 4. What we do most of the time matters more than anything else. People think that they have to go all in on every aspect of our life to see results. But if you can establish a routine 80% of the time, a routine that helps you feel better, that aligns with your health goals, that you can sustain without feeling miserable, this is what gives you the ability to live your life sustainably. Because this is 80% of the time on a calendar is about 25 days out of the month. That gives you about 5 days every month to enjoy your life appropriately, right? This is where we get to live our life and have results, because we have a different shift. If we are doing things that don't align with our goals most of the time, well, we'll know, because our body reflects what we do most of the time. And once we are aware and we're paying attention to those things, and we adjust and move our routine to something that aligns with our life most of the time, and I have many episodes of the podcast that helps you, probably the last one that will, or at least the last couple, that will give you the categories that will help you start adjusting your routine and give you targets to aim for, so that you will start to build that, so you can build something that you can actually come back to no matter what's going on. And then once you do those things most of the time, because they make you feel good, they make you feel better, it makes it so much easier for you to sustain your results and get to enjoy vacations, birthdays, special night outs, right, every now and again. right? It doesn't have to be you can't have a quote unquote cheat meal. I hate that term, but I'm just, everyone knows what I mean by it. You don't always, it doesn't always have to be that way. It's like, oh, I get to cheat on my diet. No, you don't want to build a diet where you feel like you have to cheat on it. You want to build a diet that allows you to have that night out with your wife. I have my date night with my wife every night. If I joined a coach and they said I couldn't have that, they're getting, I'm out. Go to hell. That's mine. Right? Because I know if I'm consistent 80% of the time, or 80 to 90% of the time, I can have a meal or a day off every now and again. And then the next day, I don't have to spiral out of control. I just got to wake up and go back to my routine, go back to what I was doing. Because what we do most of the time matters more than anything else. So if we can build something that helps us feel better first, and we feel good about it, it aligns with our goals. When feeling better with energy, with focus, with movement, with our routine, and it aligns with our weight loss goals, our body composition goals, right? And then we give ourselves we allow ourselves the ability to have that day off, that meal off, whatever it is, to just enjoy our life and then go right back to that 80% routine. That's the balance everyone's looking for, because a lot of times it's switched, it's reversed. 80% of the time we're doing things that don't align with, that misalign with our goals, and then 20% we're doing things that align with our goals, but then it's like super strict, and it really ends up being something that doesn't align, and now it's completely all misaligned. And this is where the patterns of struggle and misunderstanding and lack of consistency they all come from, because of we don't understand these four concepts, these four truths. We don't understand what helps us feel better. We only understand what we assume. We only think we understand what we assume, and those assumptions oftentimes make us feel worse. And that's what I want to help adjust for you. And that's why I want to do this episode today. Is once you do these things most of the time, it doesn't mean perfect, right? There's a lot of people describe weight loss, health as a black and white situation. There are certain life or death situations that, yeah, something is good, something is bad. But most of us still have time to stop that cycle before it happens. And that comes from building awareness first, building in aligned choices that gives us the understanding of what we can and can't control, right? Remind ourselves that weight loss isn't linear, and it can't be this black and white on or off thing. It has to be a very specific shade of gray for us. And the only way to lose weight is to be in a calorie deficit. That doesn't mean starve ourselves. It means do it in a way that aligns with our life. And then once we do our routine, most of the time we earn the right to live our life at the same time and have results. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's not a black and white thing. It's a different shade of gray for each of us. All similar though. It's all similar, right? All of us will have similarities in our process, but your specific shade will be a little bit different from your partner, your friend, the person on the internet who's ranting and raving about how their success was, but they probably, if they did it right, they just found their own shade of gray. That's what I really want to just help really always bring to light, is that there's always the grayness of this process is what we need to really understand. So yeah, I hope all this makes sense. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, like I said earlier, please leave a review or rating wherever you're listening to this. And if you found this helpful or insightful, please just share it with one person. I really appreciate it. I love doing these episodes, and as always, I love the growth, and I love and appreciate the growth that everyone who listens continues to provide for me. You're all amazing, and I absolutely appreciate you guys. So hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.